After 19 years of total silence, Eritrea just shocked the entire African football world by qualifying for AFCON 2027 group stages. This isn't just about football, this is about a nation emerging from isolation and reclaiming its place in continental competition. The last time Eritrea competed in Africa Cup of Nations qualifying was 2007. 27,375 days later, they re-back. And they not just participating, they re-advancing. Tonight, we're re-breaking down how this small East African nation of just 3.6 million people pulled off one of the most remarkable comebacks in African football history. We'll explore the political factors that kept them away, the grassroots rebuilding that brought them back, and what this means for African unity through sport. Section 1. To understand Eritrea's return, we need to go back to 2007. That year, Eritrea's national team played their last AFCON qualifier against Ethiopia, a match loaded with political tension given the ongoing border disputes between these neighboring nations. What followed was nearly 2 decades of sporting isolation. Unlike voluntary withdrawals, Eritrea's absence stemmed from a complex web of political instability, economic challenges, and infrastructure limitations. The Eritrean Football Federation struggled to maintain consistent operations while the country faced international sanctions and diplomatic isolation. During these 19 years, an entire generation of Eritrean footballers grew up without the dream of continental competition. Youth academies closed, coaching programs stagnated, and many talented players migrated to European leagues through individual pathways rather than national team development. But here's what makes this story remarkable: the rebuilding started from absolute zero. In 2019, Eritrea began quietly restructuring their football infrastructure. They invested in youth academies, hired foreign coaching consultants, and most importantly, started participating in regional tournaments to rebuild match fitness and tactical awareness. Like this video if you want to see more Africans learn about these incredible comeback stories that mainstream media ignores. Section 2. Now let's talk about how they actually pulled off this qualification. Eritrea entered the preliminary round of AFCON 2027 qualifying alongside 5 other nations: Chad, Liberia, South Sudan, SHOCKS and Somalia. In their first competitive matches since 2007, Eritrea faced SHOCKS in a 2-leg preliminary round. The build-up was intense, imagine the pressure on players who had never experienced continental competition, representing a nation returning after 19 years. The first leg in Asmara saw Eritrea win 2-1, with goals from striker Henok Goitom and midfielder Tekemeriam. But it was the second leg that truly announced their return. A disciplined 0-0 draw in SHOCKS secured their advancement with a 2-1 aggregate victory. What struck football analysts was Eritrea's tactical sophistication. This wasn't a team relying on raw passion alone. Coach Mehari Merhawi had implemented a defensive structure reminiscent of successful smaller nations in international competition. They pressed intelligently, defended as a unit, and capitalized on set-piece opportunities. The numbers tell the story. Eritrea completed 78% of their passes across both legs, won 62% of their aerial duels, and committed only 19 fouls total. These statistics reveal a disciplined, well-prepared side that maximized their limited resources through superior organization. Section 3. Let us examine the key figures behind this resurrection. Coach Mehari Merhawi deserves primary credit for this tactical transformation. A former Eritrean international who played during the 1990s, Merhawi spent 15 years studying European coaching methods while working with diaspora Eritrean communities in Germany and Sweden. When he returned to Eritrea in 2021, Merhawi brought modern training methodologies and a deep understanding of international football tactics. He implemented video analysis sessions, nutritional programs, and sports psychology support innovations that hadn't existed during Eritrea's previous AFCON campaigns. Captain Henok Goitom represents the bridge between Eritrea's football past and present. At 34, he is one of the few current players who remembers watching Eritrea's last AFCON qualifying campaign as a teenager. His leadership on and off the pitch has been crucial in building team chemistry among players from diverse backgrounds. The Eritrean Football Federation president, Temesgen Tiki, orchestrated the administrative revival. He secured funding through partnerships with the African Union and FIFA development programs, rebuilt relationships with CAF officials, and most importantly, established youth development pipelines that had been dormant for nearly 2 decades. Subscribe for honest, Pan-African analysis. You want to find on CNN or BBC. We cover the stories that matter to African development. Section 4. Eritrea's return represents something much larger than football success. This is about African nations refusing to accept marginalization and finding pathways back to continental prominence. When small nations like Eritrea compete successfully, it demonstrates that resources alone don't determine African sporting achievement. Consider the broader context. While global attention focuses on African football powerhouses like Nigeria, Morocco, and Senegal, nations like Eritrea prove that the continent's sporting depth runs much deeper. Their qualification alongside Chad, Liberia, South Sudan, Lesotho and Piansaipe, and Somalia shows that African football is democratizing. This democratization matters for Pan-African unity. Football serves as a universal language that transcends political divisions and economic disparities. When Eritrean fans celebrate alongside Somali and South Sudanese supporters, they're rebuilding relationships that diplomatic channels often struggle to establish. The timing is particularly significant as Africa prepares to host multiple global sporting events over the next decade. Morocco's successful 2030 World Cup bid, ongoing infrastructure investments across the continent, and growing international recognition of African sporting talent create momentum that smaller nations like Eritrea can leverage. Eritrea's journey also highlights African resilience and self-reliance. Rather than waiting for external intervention, they rebuild their football infrastructure through internal determination and regional cooperation. This model offers lessons for other African nations facing similar challenges in various sectors. Section 5. So what does Eritrea's return mean for Africa's football future? First, it expands the talent pool for continental competition. Hidden gems exist in every African nation, but they need competitive platforms to develop. Eritrea's qualification creates pathways for players who might otherwise never reach international level. Second, it demonstrates the effectiveness of long-term planning over quick fixes. Eritrea's 5-year rebuilding process offers a blueprint for other nations seeking to improve their football infrastructure sustainably. The focus on youth development, coaching education, and administrative efficiency created lasting change rather than temporary success. Third, their success validates CAF's expanded qualification format for AFCON 2027. By including preliminary rounds that give smaller nations realistic pathways to group stage competition, African football becomes more inclusive while maintaining competitive standards. Looking ahead, Eritrea now faces group stage qualification against established African football powers. While advancing further would be remarkable, their primary victory is already achieved. The return to continental competition and inspired a new generation of Eritrean footballers. The ripple effects extend beyond football. Eritrea's successful return demonstrates that African nations can overcome isolation and reclaim their continental standing through strategic planning and persistent effort. This lesson applies to economic development, diplomatic relations, and cultural exchange initiatives across the continent. Comment below which other African nation do you think deserves more recognition in continental football. Share your thoughts on how smaller African countries can build competitive sporting programs. And if this analysis helped you understand African football development better, share it with someone who needs to see how African determination creates impossible comebacks. Next week, we're re-examining how Chad's simultaneous qualification alongside Eritrea represents a broader pattern of Central and East African football resurgence. The story of African sport is being rewritten by nations that refuse to accept marginalization, and that's a story worth following.